today's session is we're going into our second strategy now. So if you guys recall, last session we did the rental reversion strategy. So we covered up a lot of things during the rental reversion strategy. And some of the stuff that we've learned in session 2 during the rental reversion strategy could potentially apply during this session. So the way that I've structured the course is that every single strategy that we learn, we can potentially stack on top of each other. Now, for the purpose of this session, I'm going to be very strict and just talk about the subdivision strategy. But every now and then you'll hear me talk about rental reversion and things like that, because some of the case studies I'm going to show you are going to have that element to it. All right. So first things first, guys. Just a bit of housekeeping. Oh, you guys are really good. You guys all muted your microphones already. All right, so please keep your microphones muted unless you guys are asking a question, because I know sometimes when the phone rings, in the background, it is a little bit disturbing for other people. Also going to have lots of chances for Q&A. And if you guys have any questions during the session, feel free to just put your hand up or just unmute your microphones and ask away. All right, so keep it pretty fluid, pretty dynamic. Next thing is just a bit of a disclaimer. This is not a course about property development. It's a course focused on adding value to established properties. And nothing in this course is financial advice. It's just financial opinion. And I'm just sharing with you experiences that I've had. All right, cool. Okay, divide and conquer subdivision. So who's played this game as a kid? Risk. You guys familiar with this game? Yeah. Cool. I love this game. When I was first introduced to this game, when I think about 8 years old, I just couldn't get enough of it. And look, the idea of the game is basically you try to conquer the world. All right, like every game in the world. But what I really love about it is the map, the way they've drawn it. It's really cool. So you've got territories and things like that. And the concept, I guess, here really is that what we're doing is kind of in reverse. So rather than amalgamating everything and conquering the world, we're trying to find really good real estate, or really good parts of the world, and then subdivide it and then conquer. So what is subdivision? I think a lot of you guys have heard the term. A lot of you guys have done it, particularly in the real estate space. But simply put, it is the act of dividing land or building into multiple lots or units. And it is the opposite of amalgamation. You hear developers talk about amalgamation a lot. I want to amalgamate this side and this side and this side so I can build like a 500-unit apartment. Subdivision is quite the opposite. So why do we do subdivision? I'll show you with one of these case studies. So case study number 1, excuse me. I can't share the address of this one, unfortunately, but I can definitely show you guys the numbers behind it. Basically, what it is it's a industrial complex. There's 5 units and a hard stand. The acquisition price for this 5-unit plus hard stand was 2.1 million. As you can see from the photos, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a bit of a hard stand on the side, which I'll show you in another photo a little bit later on. So the person who bought it, the client who bought it, bought all 5 plus a hard stand, sold 3 of them to the existing occupiers for 1.7 million and decided to keep the rest. So the math is not hard. If you buy something for 2.1, you sell, 60% of it for 1.7, like the math is not hard to calculate, right? But I'll show you the numbers in a second. But this is kind of what it looks like, just some different aspects of it. So that's the hard stand there. For you guys who don't know what hard stand means, it's basically just concrete land. Okay, so that's a hard stand right there on the left-hand side where my mouse is. Hard stands are really useful for parking, storage of things. You're putting a container in there, and people will pay for it, particularly if you're close to transport, if you're close to, let's say, an airport or a seaport, or you're a business that's got a lot of cars, a lot of vehicles, and you've just simply got nowhere to park it. A lot of people will pay good money for a hard stand. So that's a hard stand. You've got 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, 4 unit, 5 units. That's basically it. And then in terms of the numbers, whoops, that's the one I want to show you. So in terms of the numbers, let me open up the FISO. Sorry guys, I should have all this prepared. Okay, I've got some. Okay, cool. Okay, hope you guys can see the spreadsheet. Yep. Okay, so you guys are already familiar with my sort of template, but I'll run you through this one. So this one here, so the top line, that's the property. So the total net lettable area for all 5 of the units adds up to about 680 square meters. So they're about, I think they're about 150 square meters each, thereabouts. Total land size, 1147. The passing rent at the point of purchase was $98,511 net, which equates to $144 per square meter. Sorry, per annum net and per square meter. 2.1 was the price and had a reflective yield of about 4.7 initially. Now, a couple of things you guys might already be able to realize is that it seems pretty under-rented, particularly if we start looking at some of the lease comparables. So we did initially look at this as a potential rental reversion project, but then when we later on look deeper into the numbers, we realized it's actually probably a better strata opportunity. So the price per build is just over $3,000 per square meter, as you can see from here. And then we look at some of these comparables in terms of leasing. We can see rents are all over $180 per square meter. Some are, over 200. And then we look at the sold evidence. Basically, everything with the exception of this one are sold over $4,000 a square meter. And these are all strata properties. So if we're able to buy something for $3,000 a meter and the market's at $4,000 to $4,500 a meter, like that's pretty no-brainer, right? Yeah. So going to the second tab, which is where we do our feasibility. Here are the numbers that we've adopted. So rents 200 to 220 net, and rate per square meter of build for a strata property, somewhere between $3,550 to $4,250 per square meter. And these are pretty conservative numbers. So again, ended up buying it for 2.1, so just a tick over $3,000 per square meter on build. The land price is a little bit irrelevant because it's strata. And here's the kind of the breakdown of the sizes. So all the units, 1 to 5, are exactly the same, 136 square meters. The hard sand's a little bit bigger, 180 square meters. And most of these guys are on short-term leases as well, as you can see from here. Current rent, so they're all paying under market rent. And the thing is, it's because the owner was the owner manager again, he just wasn't really paying attention on market rent. So, he just did deals which he felt was right for him, but it wasn't really a reflection of market rent. But that's by and by. So if we wanted to stick with strategy 1, which is a rental reversion strategy, we will still come up pretty well. Like we will still get somewhere between 200 and 220 a square meter. The hard sand is a different story, obviously, but if you take the hard sand into consideration, like you're still going to get a pretty good increase in rent. Somewhere, around sort of between 40 to 50 grand increase in rent. And if we apply the cap rate of 5.25, which is sort of what it is in that market, the property is going to be worth, 2.6, 2.8 million. So you're still going to do pretty well. But the client wanted to basically, he's looking for assets where he can sell down and keep a portion. So this one was perfect. So looking at the fees are here. So that's the acquisition. So obviously you've got the $2.1 million acquisition price. The stamp duty is $75,000. Now, I need you guys to pay attention to this one. Because you guys, for those of you guys who are familiar with stamp duty, you guys will probably know that that looks pretty cheap for a $2.1 million property, because stamp duty is usually between 5 to 6%. So why is that the case? It's because this complex is actually already strata titled. Okay, it's already strata titled. So we didn't actually need to lift the finger to do anything to strata title it. So which is amazing. And because it's already strata titled, we decided to go to enter into 5 separate contracts rather than one big contract at 2.1 for 2 reasons. One is we're going to save stamp duty because, you know, at the lower price bracket, the stamp duty is lower. So rather than paying 6% stamp duty, we end up paying, I think, a little bit under 5% stamp duty, or 4.8, I can't remember what it was. So there's 20 grand's worth of savings there in terms of stamp duty. Secondly, from a funding perspective, it allowed us to go to several different banks as well. So for units 1 and 2, we went with one bank. For units 2 and 3, we went for another bank. And for units 5 and a half, we went for another bank. The 3 banks don't need to know what we're doing. So rather than going to the bank and saying we're applying for a $2.1 million loan, we're going to the bank and saying, hey, we're actually applying for a $600,000 loan. So it was actually a lot easier to fund if we actually did that. So there's another way why, you know, divide and conquer is quite useful. There's another way to use that strategy as well, particularly for assets like this. Now, not all assets are going to be already strata titled. This was a bit of a unicorn, I must say, but it's a good one for a case study anyway. So closing costs, 5 grand, 2.18 was a total acquisition cost. Because it's already strata titled, we didn't need to do anything in terms of DA or all that type of stuff, but we did need to register the strata. So we did have to get a lawyer to draw up some bylaws and, you know, and basically establish a body corporate. Took a bit of, so we allowed 12 months for that. So there's interest payments for 12 months, and obviously we're receiving rent for 12 months. So really it was a kind of neutral, sort of broke even. So total cost still remains relatively the same. But now looking at the sell price, our FISO was based on a 4 grand per square meter for the units, and about $850 per square meter for the hard stand. So if we decided to sell everything, we would have walked away with about $630,000 in net profit. Right, so that's pretty good, right? Yeah. Now, Michael had a question. Why did it take 12 months to register the strata if it was already strated? It didn't take 12 months, but the FISO, we allowed it for 12 months. So we allowed it for 12 months to get it registered and get a body corporate done. And also we allowed 12 months to sell down the project. But in actual fact, it took like 3 months. Because what we end up doing is we spoke to the existing tenants. 3 of them said, yeah, look, we'll buy it. And the total price was 1.7 million. Cool. Any questions? Nope. All right, cool. All right, let's move on. So that's case study number 1. So this was a really good one. You know, we call this a slam dunk because basically everything was lined up. It was already started. The vendor is not an informed vendor. So we were able to pick it up at a good price. And then we were able to basically just do it ourselves. Why did the owner not sell to the tenants initially? Just not a well-informed vendor. You can tell from the rental that he's getting. Yeah. So what had happened was an agent approached him and said, hey, would you sell this property? We can probably sell it for 2.1 million. And he said, oh yeah, I'll take it. And that's pretty much about it. Yeah. So moving on, the type of strata subdivisions, there are several types, but the 2 that I would normally work on is the strata subdivision, which is the one I just showed you. So it's basically just splitting up established assets without major alterations to it, and you're selling it down as smaller lots. And then the other one is a rental subdivision. So basically what that means is you splitting up a larger format building into smaller tenancies and then lease it out so that the overall rent is higher. Now, we're not going to have a lot of time to go through the rental subdivision strategy, but it's really straightforward. I mean, I think you guys already understand the concept. You have 1,000 square meter shop, you cut it up into 10, 100 square meter shops. The rate per square meter will probably go up by, 30, 40, 50%. So the overall rent will go up. So the overall value will go up. So it's pretty straightforward, right? Cool. Okay, so to understand subdivision for established properties, here are the 4 things that you also need to understand as well. So number 1 is you need to understand comparable sales rates. You need to understand the pricing between freeholds and strata within any given market. Understand owner-occupier versus investor demand. And you need to understand rental brackets as well. So I explain what each of these mean. So number 1, comparable sales rate. This is the easiest to understand. It's basically comparing like for like. Okay, you want to compare the same type of asset to the same type of asset and understand what the average price per square meter is. So things to consider when you're doing that: size, obviously, because there's no point in comparing a 100 square meter property to a 1,000 square meter property. In some markets, they might be comparable, but in most cases not. Quality, that's really important as well. Again, no point in comparing an A grade to a C grade property. Location, that's, I don't need to say anything else about that. Exposure, which is a really important one, because sometimes you find that in these strata complexes, because of the way it's designed and constructed and subdivided, you're going to have units that's going to have better exposure. You're going to have units that's got, the street exposure, and then you get a unit that's, hidden basically in the back. So you kind of have to understand how important is exposure and how that affects pricing as well. And then the other thing is also amenities. So what amenities does this strata complex have? Because with strata, you guys, the owners or the tenants, the occupiers, they're sharing facilities. So is there good bathroom facilities? Is there good kitchen facilities, loading docks, parking? Just to name a few. So all these things need to be considered when you guys are doing the sales comparables. Because if one estate has really good exposure but really, really bad amenities versus another estate where it's got really bad exposure but it's got really good amenities, like then how do you compare? How do you determine what's better and what's not? So it's very important to understand some of these things, and there are obviously other elements, other features that you guys need to understand as well. But these 5 are probably the top 5.
Well, just a question, Eugene here.
Yep.
When you talked about A grade versus C grade quality, could you go through some examples to demonstrate the differences between A, B, and C quality?
Yeah, so the Property Council of Australia actually have definitions of what A, B, and C grade properties are and premium grade properties are. And each asset type is different. So office space would have its own set of criteria. So for example, to be a premium grade office tower, you need to be within the CBD, you need to be within walking distance to transport, it needs to have 6 stars energy rating, it has to have car park ratios of 1 to whatever, and There's basically a checkbox you need to tick. And then so the more boxes you tick, the higher the grade is. And then the same goes with industrial properties. Industrial properties is generally more about age and access and clearance. And then retail would have its own. So each asset class would have its own sort of criteria to meet A, B, or C grade.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Michael had another question. What would proximity to transport, e.g. to trains, be worth? I mean, it'd be worth a lot. And that goes with every type of property, whether it's industrial, commercial, residential, hotels. Like transport accessibility is one of the key things. So how do you quantify it? You just need to go through the market. You just need to see what is a property that's 1 kilometer from the train station versus a property that's 3 kilometers from the train station. Like, what's the misalignment there? Isabel, is there a list of criteria you can share with us? I'll have to, yeah, I can. So I'll send you guys a link later after the session. Okay, but if you guys want to Google or just have a look at the Property Council of Australia's website, the definitions are all there. Cool. Okay, so sorry. So yeah, so comparable sales rates. So we've just covered. The next thing to understand is freehold versus strata. So is there a price premium on strata stock over freehold? In some markets there are, in some markets there isn't. So I give you an example. So which ties into the second point as well, which I'll cover off as well. So at what price point, capital value, is there a cutoff for strata? Which means, is there a price point in any given market where strata sales just don't make sense? So for example, like Toowoomba as an example, you'll find that there's not a lot of strata stock in Toowoomba because property prices are still relatively cheap. So somebody can buy a freestanding warehouse for, $1 million, $1.5 million. So why would you bother paying $1 million for a strata? You might as well buy, a freehold. But conversely, if you come to Sydney CBD, the entry price for a freehold warehouse could be, $3-4 million. Then maybe it makes sense to buy strata for less than $1 million. So in any given market, sometimes there's a premium over strata versus freehold. And you guys just need to understand, if there is, and what is the premium? Is it 10% more? Is it 15% more? Is it 20% more? And each market is different. Number 3, a really important one is understanding owner-occupier versus investor demand. Now, generally speaking, an owner-occupier will pay more than an investor. However, understanding demand will influence your exit strategy. So for instance, as I mentioned, like Toowoomba, as an example, you'll find that there are fewer owner-occupiers versus investors. And the reason for that is owner-occupiers are all local. Okay, they're residents, or they're local to that location, local to Toowoomba. But investors, especially of late, are all coming from outside of Toowoomba. And because Toowoomba housing prices aren't that high, a lot of businesses in Toowoomba actually don't, from a owner perspective, don't actually have a lot of equity. So they don't actually have the function to go and buy a place for themselves. So it's slightly different behavior. So like in Toowoomba, I would never go for a strata property. I mean, again, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, I won't, because I just don't feel like there's a lot of demand for it because of the way the market behaves. And then the second reason why it's really important to understand owner-occupied versus investor demand is that if you're strataing something, using case study number 1 as an example, the first people that you want to go for are owner-occupiers, because they're the ones that typically will pay more than investors. They typically pay 10 to 20% more than an investor. So once you've kind of exhausted the owner-occupier buyers, then you're left with investors. So if you're able to, let's say, sell 2/3 to an owner-occupier, that's great. So understanding that's really important so that you can get your pricing model right, so your feasibility right. 4th thing to understand is just rental brackets as well. So again, generally speaking, rental rates per square meter increases as the tenancy size decreases. All right, that's kind of conventional wisdom. However, that's not always true. And sometimes the reverse is true. So it's really important to understand the market. So I'll give you one example. Say in Melton, west of Melbourne, you'll find that warehouses over 1,000 square meters actually attract a higher rate per square meter than warehouses under 1,000 square meters. So you kind of go, why? So again, it's supply and demand. So, and this is a lot more relevant for warehousing and factories, because the nature of the business, you can't really have a part of your factory here and a part of your factory in a building across the street. It just doesn't work. Whereas an office is different, right? If you have too many staff, you can't get enough office space. Yeah, you can rent one office here and then you can rent another office across the road. Like, you don't really need to be in one place. But for warehousing and for factories, it's really important to have everything under one roof. So if you're a business that requires 1,000 square meters of industrial space and there's nothing available in that particular market, you'll pay a higher rent. So if you actually go on to real commercial, for example, at the moment, and you look at Melton and you look at, all right, what's available under 1,000 square meters? I haven't looked at it recently, but there could be maybe like 20 available, let's say. But then if you look at warehouses 1,000 square meters and above, there might only be 2. Right, so it's really important to understand that. And then furthermore, it's understanding the rental brackets will also assist in how you design the subdivision configuration. So, for example, is there a jump in price or rental price between 100 to 200 square meters? Or is there, is there a jump between 500 to 300 square meters? And then you start to recognize patterns. And then if you realize, oh wow, there's actually a 20% difference between 100 square meters versus 300 square meters, let's say, then you're going to try to configure your subdivision to take advantage of having more units in that 100 square meter range. Make sense? Cool. All right, so moving on. Sorry, that's not supposed to be there. Moving on, case study number 2. So this is a deal that I really, really like, and you guys might have seen the video of this one on YouTube. So it's a neighborhood shopping center in Byron Bay. One of my clients picked it up for $3.8 million. It has 9 tenancies in there, and I'll show you the floor plan in a second. It has an initial net yield of 5%, so not overly great, but there's upside, which I'll explain in a second. The projected sales is going to be over 5.5 million, and the projected profit is going to be over $1.3 million. And I'll show you the fee zone in a second. So having a closer look, so you can see from the photos here, it is a really well built and refurbished, really well looked after neighborhood shopping center. They did a major refurb back in 2020, and there's nothing you need to do with the center. It looks really good, presents really, really well. And if you look at the configuration of it, you can see it's already kind of subdivided into multiple tenancies. So you've got a cafe, you've got unit 7 and 6, and so there's about 9 tenancies in total. Plenty of car parking, and you've got really good amenities. The other thing also worth noting is that the inter-tenancy walls, I don't know whether you guys can see really well in the photos, they're concrete tilt-ups. So that satisfies one of the major criteria in terms of fire and egress, which I'll cover later on in a few slides. So in terms of the numbers, sorry guys. Here's kind of what it looks like. I'm gonna blow it up here. Okay, so that's the property. You guys can Google it if you want. That's the total square meterage of the building. That's the total land size. That's the passing rent at the time of purchase, which is really low, only $253 per square meter. The original asking price was 4.5, and we just went in there with a sledgehammer and smashed the owner and got it down to 3.8, which is a really good result. But looking at the rental evidence and the sales evidence, it's pretty compelling. it's look, I mean, particularly looking at the sales evidence, we can see that a lot of the strata stuff that's been sold in the area are getting, somewhere between sort of 7 to 8.5 grand per square meter on build. So what we've adopted, oops, too much. In terms of what we feel the market is, as a freehold, the rents we should be getting is somewhere between $450 to $500 per square meter. And the price per square meter of build for a freehold is between 6 to 6.5 grand a square meter. That's pretty consistent based on the sales evidence. However, for strata, it's somewhere between 7.5 to 8 grand a square meter for a building like this. So again, so back to the freehold versus strata, is there a premium? Yes, there is. And we've identified it in this market. So here's the tenancies. So three of these tenancies are vacant currently, which is great for us because these three are the ones we're going to sell first to own occupiers once the strata's all done and dusted. And then most of these guys have pretty short-term sort of expiry, so within the next sort of 12 to 18 months. With the exception of the cafe, which is these guys, they've got another 5-year option beyond that, and we're quite okay with that. So I won't go through the rents too much, but if we did nothing to the property and we just filled in the vacancies, there's 100 grand in rent there. So the passing rent based on the existing tenancies with the 3 vacancies is at 5%. So if we did nothing to the property and we just filled the vacancies, there's another 100 to 110 grand of income right there. And that's immediately going to push the value of the property up to about $5 million. So this is a really good acquisition for that purpose and also for a strata subdivision purpose as well. So looking at the strata subdivision FISO, again, pretty straightforward, guys. 3.8 million acquisition price, stamp duty is about 210, closing costs, legal costs and building inspection, So your total acquisition costs a little bit over $4 million. So we've budgeted total of 60 grand to do the strata subdivision, which I'll go through the process in a second. And we're anticipating the strata subdivision and the sell down period to be between 18 to 24 months. So there'll be interest payments during that time, but also obviously we're also collecting rent at that time as well. So all up, the total project cost is about 75 grand. So the total project cost, including the 75 grand, is about 4.1 million. In terms of this, the gross sales, so we're being a little bit more conservative. So we're saying we'll get on average 7.5 grand per square meter. So some of these units might get 8, some of these units might get 7, but on the blended rate, 7.5 grand per square meter is going to give us about 5,560,000. Less some commission because we need to appoint an agent to sell it and less legal fees. We're left with about $1.3 million in net profit. That's pretty good, right? Yeah. Now, since the client bought this, he's actually decided he's going to sell 2/3 and keep 1/3 of it. So he's probably going to keep the cafe and a couple of the other ones. So he'll end up again being able to cash out and then have 3 of these units, to himself unencumbered. In terms of the cash flow, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but one of the good things about this particular client is he actually had really strong funding. So he was able to get a 75% loan. In most cases, banks are only going to give you about 65 on this one. So for him, he needed to just pull out around $1.2 million of his own money, and he'll be able to then spit out about $1.3 million in profit at the end of the project. So it's kind of like doubling his equity. So not a bad result. Any questions on this one?
Just a quick question about what criteria would your client be using to choose which units to keep and which ones to sell?
Yeah. So the ones which are vacant will sell first. Yeah, because we want to target owner occupiers first. And then he actually worked it all out. I haven't got his version of the feasibility, but he's actually worked out that he needed to keep, I think, like 260 square meters to make it work, to get all his money back and make it work. So he actually figured it all out. But essentially, the vacant ones will go first. We'll try to market those first. We would then try to approach each of these tenants individually and say, hey, look, do you guys want to buy it? And those who say yes, we'll obviously sell it to them. And those who say no, then we might just put in the back burner and then reevaluate once the lease expiry gets a little bit closer. Cool. Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's moving on. So who wants a deal like this? Yeah, excellent. Well, let's have a think about what we need to consider when we're looking at a strata opportunity. So there are obviously statutory requirements which the council and local government, requires you to have, and then there are non-statutory requirements which I think you guys should definitely consider. So each council is going to be different in terms of their requirements and in terms of their policies and everything. But essentially, these three are the main things that the local council will want to know. Number one is, have you got adequate egress or fire protection between the tenancies? Okay, so you can't just have a steel tilt-up wall between the tenancies, because if one of them catches fire, like the whole thing's going to burn out. So you need to have adequate fire protection between the tenancies. That's number one. Number two is amenities. Is there ample amenities? So particularly if it's office space, let's say, you'll probably need a minimum of X amount of toilets per square meter. Air conditioning, power, do you have adequate air conditioning or power? And then the other thing is parking. Is there enough parking for the number of lots or units that you want to subdivide into? Again, each council is going to be different. Like if you're doing a subdivision in a CBD, let's say, car parking might not be a requirement at all. But when you go outside of CBD, in most cases, they'll need a minimum of either 1 to 75 square meters if it is office space, or 1 to 100, depending. So each council is different. So you need to understand the council requirements for all of that. And then the non-statutory things to consider is exposure. So when you're designing the subdivision, are you limiting exposure or are you maximizing exposure to all units? So like residential developers always face this sort of dilemma because they're never able to design an office, a residential apartment that's going to give maximum exposure to every single unit. So that's why there's always these little dodgy units tucked away somewhere at the back of a development, which sells for like 20% less than all the other units, right? So sometimes with commercial, you have that as well. Access, really important, especially if it's retail and industrial. You have to be able to provide adequate access to the tenancy, particularly for trucks, for vehicles, deliveries, da da da. Through the layout, are you subdividing it in a way that the layout just sucks? Bad, is inefficient? Are you having like dog legs here and battle axe here? Like, another thing to consider. Number four, common area for features. Really important because you need to understand that it is Strata, basically you're in a community and you'll be sharing a lot of things. You'll be sharing the driveway, you'll be sharing the gardens, you'll be sharing the amenities, the bathrooms, potentially. Definitely sharing the lobby if it's if it's an office building. So you want to make sure that some of these common areas are done well as well. So it's inviting and people want to be there. Okay. Any questions? All good? All right.
Yeah, quick question, Will.
Yep.
I often see photos of industrial complexes where the common bathrooms are pretty sub-average, put it that way. How important are common bathrooms in an industrial complex in terms of their appearance?
Well, I've never heard someone say to me, I don't appreciate adequate bathroom facilities, right? But it's also a reflection of how much rent they're paying. So if you guys remember, did I show you guys the Toowoomba example last time where there's only one toilet between 7 units? Did I show you guys that one? Maybe
No,
not.
I don't think so.
Okay. So as an example, so this one here that we just picked up for a client, it's 7 industrial units, but it's literally just one toilet, like one pan. So men, women all have to use the one pan, and there's 7 units out there. And the only reason why the owners got away with it so far is because it's a C grade piece of shit, right? And people that are only paying like $40 a square meter.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So yeah, you get away with it. But if you want to maximize the value, you want to maximize the rent, you're going to have to upgrade these facilities. So one of the things that we are looking at doing is expanding that particular toilet block into 4, so 2 men, 2 female. One and each of them will have accessible toilets in there as well. And that's going to be one of the main drivers to increase the rent in that particular complex. So I'll probably cover that off in the next session, because next session is about refurb. So that's going to be one of my case studies. So I'll talk to you more about that one. But to answer your question, Eugene, is basically what you can get away with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. So let's talk about the process. The process is fairly straightforward. Now, this is assuming that you've already done your due diligence and you've secured the property. So you've ideally spoken to a town planner already, and town planner is like, yeah, look, yeah, this has got a good probability of getting it approved for a strata subdivision. So the next steps are fairly straightforward. And again, we're talking about established properties already. We're not talking about brand new builds. Okay. So number one is get some proper plans of the existing building done. That's really important because the surveyors, like they'll probably want to have a look at it before they should get out on site and start drafting the strata plan. Okay, so number 2 is appointing a surveyor that specializes in strata, and there's a few names out there. I think Strata Plus is one guy, one company in New South Wales that basically just does this day in, day out. You guys can Google them; they're pretty good to deal with. So step 2 is get a surveyor out there and survey the building and draft up the strata plan. Number 3 is lodge with council. So hey council, here's a bunch of fees. Please approve it. You wait for the approval to come out, and then number 4, you get a lawyer to prepare the strata bylaws, because you need to register it if you want to establish a body corporate. Next thing is, once you've got the approval from council, with the help of the lawyer, you want to lodge the registration of title with the land titles office. Okay, so each state is called different. So a land titles office, I think everybody knows what it is. Once that's going on, once that's done, then you may want to establish a body corporate to basically govern the strata complex. And then number 7, optional, is you may want to appoint a strata manager to look after the strata estate for you. Now, this is particularly important if you're looking to sell it individually to a lot of lot owners. Like, for example, if there's only 3 lots in that strata complex, a lot of times you don't need a strata manager, because the 3 owners will just get together as part of body corporate and just sort things out. But if you're strata subdividing and there's like 20 lots in there, then maybe it might make sense to have a external strata manager that looks after everything. But anyway, it's optional. You don't always have to have it. And then if you're really smart about it, you can actually sell the strata management rights to a strata company. Because usually you sign them up on a 5+5 year sort of contract. So it's cash flow for them. Sometimes they're happy to pay for it. Cool. Sorry, any questions before we move on?
In terms of selling the management rights to another company, are you referring to like where there's like an on-site manager and then they manage the day-to-day maintenance of the property, or?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be an on-site manager. Just imagine a unit, a residential unit block. Just imagine, there's 100 units in there. Typically, there's a strata management company that looks after everything, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to, that external strata manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And if you're the developer who's doing the strata subdivision, you might go and say, hey, look, strata company number one, I'm happy to sign this contract to you for the next 10 years. Give me 20 grand or whatever. You can protect.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
Hey, Will,
Hey,
do you have any strata surveys that you could recommend for Brisbane or Southeast Queensland?
yeah, I do. So I'll send you the links later.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Tim's got a question. Could this be done with leaseholds? Yeah, yes. But there's an extra layer of complexity. But technically, yes. Rusty has a question. Typically, how long does it take from start to finish? It depends. But 12 months, I think, is more than adequate. 6 to 9 months typically, but 12 months more than adequate. Cool. All right. Case study number 3. Let's have a look at this one. This is an office strata subdivision. And this is quite interesting because this is an older case study. Actually, this one goes back to 2017 or so. Some of you guys might know this building, 289 King Street in Mascot. It's got the travel lodge down the bottom. It's got the Wilson car parking in the back, and it's got 6 levels of office space. So long story short, one of these levels acquired for $4.1 million. It had a 746 square meters floor plate at the time of purchasing. After subdivision, because we had to allow for common area, the net lettable area dropped down to 638 square meters. So you'll lose some space when you do this type of stuff. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. In this instance, we did. So we subdivided into 8 separate strata lots, sold them all for a combined almost $5.6 million. Less cost, there's a $1.1 million profit. Took about 12 months to do. And this was the floor plate before strata subdivision. So as you can see, this is a funded building, and it would not do well as a whole floor sort of occupancy because there's no efficiency in the floor plate, as you guys can see. When you're looking at office buildings, the best type of office buildings is typically having a side core. So basically a square with a side core, so the space becomes very efficient. So you can actually have visuals all the way across the floor. Like that's the best type of office space you can have. All right. But in this instance, the office space was an afterthought. The developer was developing the hotel first, and then halfway through construction, he realized, oh, he could actually add a few office space because he had additional floor space. So he then decided to build the office space on top. So the office space was an afterthought. So as you can see, this office space has 2 cores, which is highly inefficient. So as a whole floor occupier, you would never rent this space because you can't have visual from this corner to this corner or this corner from this corner. It's just highly inefficient. However, as a strata subdivision, it works perfectly well. It's like a dream come true because now we can have offices on this side. There's 2 units here, few offices here, along the perimeter, and 1 big office here. So anyway, this is the way that we subdivide this particular floor. So you still got the kitchen here, you still got the toilets here, and you got the fire stairs and storeroom here. And the corridor becomes a common area. So so we lost about 130 square meters in the common area. So it was yeah, 746, and yeah, about 100 square meters we lost.
Are there questions, or are
Yep.
there consultants that will provide advice as to how to maximize the efficiency of splitting up an office space like this?
Yes. Yep. So you can show this to any good surveyor, architect, or just people in this space. Like there's a lot of fit out companies as well that's in this space. Elias, you got your hand up? I think you're an expert in this, so.
Yeah, we how's everyone? Yeah, we do commercial fit outs, and I come across this a lot with my real estate agent I work with. He actually splits up tenancies. The question I'm going to ask is, or the question that comes, the issue is that obviously splitting up all the AC. So I don't know if we're going to cover that on the next session, but we've got to consider the aircon and also the electrical. So I'm not sure. You might cover this on the next session with the fit outs, but yeah, what do you do there?
Yeah, so for this particular one, yeah, we had to provide 8 different meters. We had to provide 8 separate air conditioning units. As a matter of fact, this one here had, I think, 2 units. We had to provide at least 1 car parking spaces per lot. This the bigger one had 3, if I remember correctly, because council basically said, no, you need to provide minimum 1 car space for every 75 square meters of office space. Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, Lars, yeah, we had to do that. So we had to upgrade the air conditioning or reconfigure the air conditioning. We had to install new meters for each lot, and car parking as well.
Yeah, so it does have a bit of a cost involved in that. And what about all the walls? Do they have to be fire rated or any?
Yes, yes. So go back to the numbers. So I don't have all the numbers here because this one here is this particular case study is quite a while ago, so I've lost the FISO on it. But yeah, there was about 400 or 500 grand worth of building works, which is the intertenancy walls, which are all fire rated, the common area, these are all glass walls, common area walls. There's obviously like 9 doors, the splitting of the air conditioning, the power, and all of that. So I think, yeah, so there's about 400 or 500 grand worth of work to be done there.
And also, obviously we come across this in a way where do you make it so it's a warm shell? So basically you have flooring and ceiling for the tenant to come in and do their own fit out? Or do you have it as a cold shell? So it's basically concrete and no ceiling. How would you present it?
That's a really good question. It depends on the demand, right? Now, for this particular property, we provided a warm shell because of the type of clientele that we're going to get. So this is literally, for you guys who don't know where it is, this is literally 10 minutes walk from domestic airport in Sydney. So the type of clientele that we're aiming for are going to be small business owners, particularly those in freight or in logistics, and also kind of people who businesses are looking for a satellite office with a lot of staff traveling, so that they can stay in the travel lodge and work upstairs. So those were kind of like the specific sort of end users that we had envisioned. And those guys are not the creative type, let's say, right? They want something that's relatively straightforward. So we gave them warm shell, we gave them carpet tiles, we gave them ceiling, lighting, air conditioning. All they needed to do was do their own internal fit out, maybe put in a boardroom, put in an office, and put in their own furniture. Now, there are instances, but not this particular building, but some other offices where the end user was more of a creative type. Maybe it was a fashion designer, or maybe it was a graphics designer or an architect. Those ones, what we did was we left it as a cold shell because they probably want to come in and put their own fingerprints on the fit out. So yeah, so again, it depends on the demand, depending on the end user. So it's really, so going back to the prior point, it's really important to understand owner-occupier versus investor demand, and what type of owner-occupiers are out there that will want this type of space. And each building is going to cater to different type of users. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Obviously, having a cold shell, also, you've got room to negotiate when you get that tenant in to say, okay, well, I can put this much in to put the floor in or the ceiling in. It's a bit of a negotiation path. Now, just question off this one as well. Did you have to install kitchenettes or any sort of, or did they use a common area kitchen outside? Because there's 8 different tenancies or whatever they were.
Yeah, so to comply with council, we didn't need to install additional. But some of the tenants, they wanted their own, so they did their own.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Will, Dan here. So just wanted to do a separate meter or water meter for each of the new tenant that you put in this building.
Electric meter, yes, but not water meter, because there's no water going into the tenancies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's just water coming into the common area here. So what?
Right.
So what some of these tenants, some of these occupiers did, they basically just built out their own kitchenette, but it's a dry kitchenette, so there's no sink or anything like that. So they'll have obviously a bench and maybe a fridge and a microwave, a kettle, but they'll come to the common area kitchen area to get the water and things like that.
Okay.
Les?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, going back to this as well, as I do this a lot. We also, if someone does want to put a kitchen in, you can also install a pump. So it goes up to the grid ceiling, it goes out and goes into the common area. So you don't have to core drill at any slabs, or if there's any problem with body corporates in such a big building, you can also install pumps.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think subsequent to this project, I think some of the occupiers have done that. But for this particular floor, we didn't need to. So none of the other guys needed it. But you're right, you can install pumps. Cool. Okay, any other questions for this one?
Is any parking requirement like this council? Do you put more tenants in during the approval process? Do you need to consider that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Is there any parking ratio requirement for tenants into this office?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
Sorry. Yeah. So a requirement for this building when you add more tenants into the.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I think Dan was asking about is there a car parking ratio requirement if you strata title a space?
Yes, so this one here, council required 1 to 75 square meters. So for every 75 square meters of office space, you need to provide at least 1 car parking spaces. So for example, lot 16 here is 33 square meters. So 1 car parking spaces was allocated to this one. This one here was 44 square meters. So 1 parking space was allocated to this one. This one here was 230 square meters. So 3 car parking spaces was allocated to this one on title.
One title. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yep, no worries.
So we're just on the car parking spaces. Do you find that whilst it's fine to provide minimum requirement car parking as required by council, but from a usability perspective, would it be better to provide more car parking spaces in the case where certain operators have more staff to work at the offices? Or
If you can, yes. Sometimes you
Okay.
can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like same thing, right? I've never heard anyone say, I wouldn't want another car parking space.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But you're just going to work out the costs and
Yeah.
the viability as well. Sometimes you can't physically provide more car parking spaces sometimes. Yeah. And that's a constant struggle for a lot of developers.
Yeah.
So Rusty has a question. What if we didn't have enough car spaces to start with? Good question. So then you might not meet the minimum car parking requirement for the council. So this might not be feasible for Strata Subdivision. So you might have to move on. So you might have to pull out that deal. Cool. Okay, so this is what it ended up looking like. Sorry, I don't have any high-res photos. This is back in the days with my Blueberry, I think I took it with. It wasn't that old actually, but anyway. Okay, so moving forward, what are we actually looking for in a deal? Okay, so this is the question that you guys probably all are asking, like, how do I find these deals? How do I assess these deals? So, as I mentioned, we're not looking for greenfield sites where we can build a strata complex. We're looking for established properties that we can convert into strata complexes. So ideally, we'll look at existing assets that already has multiple tenancies. So the first two examples that I showed you guys already had the multiple tenancies. The third one, the office space didn't, but that falls into the second thing, which is large format buildings. So maybe you can buy something that's got large floor plate, and then you can subdivide it, just like the one in Mascot that we just had a look at. Go for places where there is a premium for strata stock. Typically, I would go for something that's got a short WALE or already have some existing vacancies. Again, because what I ideally will want to do is be able to sell down a portion of the project straight away so that I've de-risked the entire thing. And then the best people to sell to are owner occupiers. So if I have a short WALE or if I have existing vacancies, I know I can move those first. So like for example, the one in Byron Bay where there's 3 vacancies, I know if I sold those 3 straight away, I would have de-risked the project significantly already. And I could probably do that within the first few months of gaining control of the property. Even though the strata hasn't been approved, you can still do it, and I'll explain how to do it in a second. And then the last thing, what are we looking at? We're looking at places where there's good owner-occupied demand, because they're the guys that are going to pay you more money. Make sense? Cool. Okay, Rusty's got another question. We need vacant possession anyway for the whole floor, isn't it? If we have to subdivide or just in the whole floor. No, we don't have to have complete vacant possession. We can always stage it. So going back to the Byron Bay example, we can still proceed with the Strata subdivision, with the Strata approval without touching any part of the building, which is probably the best thing to do. So the first property that we looked at, the warehouses, it was already Strata subdivided, so there's nothing we needed to do. The second one, it was already built in a way that we can Strata subdivide without touching the building. So we can do that on the background, in the background without affecting any tenants. The third case that we looked at is the one where, yeah, we needed vacant possession so that we could go in and build these walls and subdivide it that way. But in saying that, you also don't need to have a full floor that's vacant. Maybe the half of the floor is vacant. Then what you simply do is you still go through the strata subdivision process. You just don't build it, or you can stage it. So you can stage one, maybe you can build half the floor, and then you move on to the next part of the floor once that tenant moves out or whatever. How can we find locations for owner occupiers? Well, you can't really find it per se. It's more about understanding which markets will have a strong owner occupier demand. So applying the same principles that you would apply to any other projects, make sure, you know, place that's got good demand, you know, good location, good accessibility, apply the same rules and everything as you would for any other project. And then, but ask an additional question. Maybe you ask the agents there, you know, people who are in the know, hey, you know, are there a lot of owner occupiers and things like that? So I hope that answers your question, Nelly. All right, cool. Beautiful. Okay, moving on. Moving on in terms of funding options. Now, previously we were doing a rental reversion strategy. I was talking about the lease stock option, which is really, really good because that really ties in with the rental reversion strategy. With the strata subdivision or with the subdivision strategies, that's not always the case because, as you can see from some of these examples, a lot of them are vacant, partially vacant, or on short-term leases. So lease stock might not work. So you might end up having to go with a full doc, low doc, in some cases, but maybe private lending. Now, one of the good things about this is I assume that most of you guys want to strata subdivide and then sell straight away. So you're not necessarily holding on to the asset for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You're holding on to the asset for 1, 2 years maximum. So even if you go with a private lender, even though the interest rates are relatively more expensive, it might still be worth doing because you're not using them for long term. So it might cost you an extra 5%, you know, in terms of funding, but it might be an easier option. So things to consider. Case study 4. So this is just a one that I thought I just throw in there. It might not necessarily be relevant, but car parking is a really good strata project to do as well. I don't know whether you guys know this building, guys in Sydney, but Park and Fly in Mascot, all the car spaces in there are strata titled. Most people actually don't know that. I think they've got about 800 car parking spaces in there. They strata and sold everything. This is going back maybe 15 years ago now. Initially, they sold it for about 50 grand per space. So, and then you as the purchaser had 2 choices. One is you can use it yourself as an owner occupier. Let's say, you know, you travel a lot, you want to park there and then go to the airport. So you can use the car space yourself, or you can lease it back to the car parking operator and get, I forgot what the rate is, but maybe like $300 a month in rent, something like that. I think the most recent one sold for 80,000 in there, I think. So the reason why I like car parking spaces, and I know in the beginning I said the only asset types I'm going to cover is office, retail, and industrial, but I just want to quickly talk about this one because I thought it's pretty interesting because they have like 3 bites of the cherry with this one. One is they sold all the car parking spaces at 50 grand a pop. Number 2, they have car parking management rights. So for casual car parking, they earn the daily car parking, what are called fees. And then number 3, they also leased out a portion of that car park to a car wash operator. So they got kind of like 3 bites of the cherry. So anyway, I thought I'll just throw this in there just to give you guys different perspectives. Self-storage might be another really interesting one as well. People are paying 8-9 grand a square meter for self-storage in some areas, and they're relatively cheap to build. So Rusty has a question: how much differential are we talking about in rates between bank and private lending? So private lenders probably 11 to 15% per annum, depending who you go with. And banks typically around 7%. What is the ROI on car parks? I don't know, sorry. I don't know. I haven't looked at the feasibility, but I would assume that a car parking space, a car park like this will cost maybe 2 grand a square meter to build. And to have 800 car spaces, you know, you will probably need at least 50 square meters per car space, because 15 square meters is for the car space alone, but then you got circulation space. So that's what 40,000 square meters. Is that right? Shit, I don't know. I don't want to speculate. Sorry. I'll come back to you on that one. I'll dig up the fees and I'll share with everybody. Michael, one I just heard of was man caves. Yep. That's a really good one as well. Yeah, the man caves popping up everywhere. They seem to be really, really popular. All right, cool. Moving on. So how to triage properly. So I always talk about triage because, again, you know, we want to flick through 1,000 deals to find one. And just going back to the things that we're looking for. So we want to look for existing assets that's already got multiple tenancies in it. Number one. Or large format buildings that are, you know, 500,000, 2,000 square meters or more. We want to look at areas where there is a premium for strata stock, properties that's got short WALE or have some vacancies, and good owner-occupied demand. Those first kind of 4, you can pretty much just work out online. If you go to like real commercial, you'll be able to, if you spend enough time there, like you'll be able to find multiple tenants, properties that got multiple tenancies or large format buildings. And if you look at enough comparables online, you'll see the difference between strata and freehold. Excuse me, and you will be able to see whether the building's got some vacancies or short WALE. The last one, where it's got good unoccupied demand, you kind of have to pick up the phone and call agents and talk to agents. Yep. So this stuff requires work, as I mentioned in session number 1. Like doing this stuff requires a lot of work. Sorry, that's not supposed to be there. Okay, negotiated deal. So as I mentioned in the previous session, each strategy have different trigger points and different levers to pull. What's really important, in my opinion, for these strata deals is the price, because if there's no, obviously, you know, upside in the price, like it's not feasible. The other one, which I would use as much as possible, is a delayed settlement. The reason for that is it's going to take time for the DA to be approved. So you don't necessarily want to settle on the property until that DA is approved or, you know, coming into approval. So if you're able to negotiate a longer term settlement, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, it's going to be really beneficial, because all you're putting down is maybe 5 or 10%, and you're not paying anything else apart from consulting fees, but you're doing all that subdivision in the background, getting all the approvals done in the background. So the settlement period is one that I would try to push as hard as I can. Some people are going to say no, some people are going to say yes, but if you can push it, try to push it. Deposit, it's not that important, 5, 10%, it's neither here or there. Number 4, permission to market would also imply permission to talk to the existing occupiers of the space. Because the best case scenario will be you negotiate a decent price for it, and then you can negotiate a decent settlement. Let's call it a 9-month settlement, which should be more than enough to draft the plans and get it lodged. But you also want to be able to get in there and start talking to the existing occupiers so that they can express interest to buy the property and exchange contracts subject to DA approval. So the next part is how do you execute the strategy? So, which is kind of what I've just kind of covered, is step one is you want to prepare the draft strata plans as soon as possible and submit it to council for approval. So ideally during the settlement period, for reasons that I've just explained. Number two, once it's been lodged, the plans have been lodged, present these unapproved strata plans to existing tenants or occupiers to solicit purchasing interest. So half of them might say, yep, I'm interested. Half of them might say no. The ones who are interested, you negotiate a deal, step three, and then you prepare a contract. So this is like basically selling off the plan here, guys. So you exchange contracts, and the contract is subject to this DA being approved. And there'll be sunset clauses in there and all that type of stuff. Obviously, the lawyers will be able to sort all that out. And then once you've sold a good percentage of the project to the existing occupiers, you've basically de-risked the entire project. Now that you can take your time now to sell the remaining lots, and depending on how many you've got, I always try to sell them in stages because you want to keep the supply low. So going back to Byron Bay, so there's 9 in there. Let's say we sell 3 of them to existing occupiers, then we've got 6 left. I will probably only put 2 on the market at one time, maybe 3 maximum. And the way I would do it is I would have one really expensive and one that is fair market value. And the one that's fair market value will sell first. And once that's sold, then you put another one on, and then you put another one on, etc. And the reason for that is you don't want to price everything exactly the same. You know, this is pretty common sense, right? You always pair things. One's more expensive, one's cheaper, because a cheaper one will be perceived as better value or a bargain or cheap, and that will usually transact first. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt you to come down in price, but it will hurt you if you go up in price potentially, depending on obviously a number of factors like demand and things like that. But in a very short period of time, if you're going, you know what, I'm going to increase the price from this to this, you'll find that there's a lot more resistance from buyers than you would the other way around. You set a really high price and then coming down, you have much a lower resistance from buyers. So that's what I would do. And then number 5, you can either you can potentially keep a portion and refinance and then go again, or maybe you want to sell out of the entire project. It's completely up to you. Any questions here? All right, if you do, just shout out at me. Okay, so we're coming to an end now. So it's just a quick reminder, guys. So we're halfway through the course. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it so far. Hope you guys have found value in the courses so far. The next one's in 2 weeks. So part 4, we'll be covering off refurbishment and repositioning. And then part 5, 2 weeks after that, and part 6, 2 weeks after that. Cool.
So we'll just going back to the previous slide, executing the strategy. where you were talking about having two units on the market, one having above market price and one at market price. Would you, once the one that sells at market price, would you ever consider the next one that you put on just slightly above that, just to slowly increase the pricing?
So can you say it again? So
yeah, so what you were saying about putting two units on the market at the same time, one at a above market price and one at market price.
Yep.
The one that ends up selling at market price, you end up replacing that with another unit.
Yep.
Would you, for that new unit that you're now marketing, would you put that at a slightly higher price to slowly increment the pricing, or would you still keep it at the previous price?
Potentially, yes. It really depends on what the demand is like. How long did it take you to sell the first one, as an example?
Okay.
So you kind of have to get a feel for the market as well. You know, if it's taking a long time to sell, like let's say it's taking 6 months to sell that one unit, then maybe it doesn't make sense for you to come up with another one that's, you know, more expensive. I mean, most likely what you would do is you would still put it up at the same asking price as the one before, because naturally the property will probably transact at slightly lower than asking price. So let's say you put it up for $1 million and you end up selling for 900,000.
Yeah.
The replacement lot, you probably put it up for $1 million, not at 900,000. Yeah. But if the market is really strong and you sold something within like 2 weeks, then maybe we put up the next one at 1.1 million or 1.05 million, depending on, you know, what it is.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, obviously you try it on and you find ways to maximize the profit.
Cool.
Cool. Anyone else got any questions? Or Tim? Tim's got a question. How do you gauge demand for properties with hard stand? Is there a premium between concrete versus gravel versus land? Yes. To a warehouse, yes. So obviously, concrete hard stand is going to be worth more, you know, for obvious reasons. And then gravel, and then, you know, just greenfield. How do you gauge demand? Just like anything else, you kind of just treat it. There's two ways to look at hard stand. One is separate to the warehouse, and one is part of the warehouse. So if it's separate to the warehouse, then you would treat it independently. So what businesses out there would need a hard stand? So your typical businesses will be people who require a huge amount of car parking. So maybe they have tour buses, as an example. They need somewhere to park it. Maybe people with containers. They just need to park the container somewhere because they're in transit, they're delivering. Or just people that's just got a lot of loose equipment, goods that they just need to store somewhere, but they don't necessarily need a cover for. And depending on the market, like you could get 25 bucks a square meter for hard stand. In some markets, you can get 50 bucks per square meter of hard stand. So again, it's just understanding what that asset class or asset type would get. If the hard stand was part of the warehouse, then, you know, again, you kind of think, or what type of businesses would require a good amount of hard stand. And it's probably typically people that requires a lot of truck access. Sometimes they use that as a turning circle. It could also be some businesses, they might construct some silos to store various goods in there. So they might need a hard stand to construct those type of purpose-built, you know, structures for their particular business. So it is pretty dynamic. But what I would encourage is, like, when you start going out and inspecting these properties, like purposely go out and inspect properties that perhaps have a bigger hard stand ratio. And then just talk to the agents and say, hey, look, why is that one here? Like, is anyone paying extra for the hard stand? Da, 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 da. The other thing also worth noticing is that when you're figuring out the fair market rent for a property, sometimes you should take into consideration a hard stand. So if a warehouse had a good portion of hard stand, how much of that rent the tenant is paying do you think is contributing to the hard stand? Because a lot of times they're not going to have two separate columns, right? You're not going to have like a warehouse column of rent and a hard stand column of rent. The lease is just going to have one number, and it'll be a blur or amalgamation of the two. So sometimes you might just need to have a better understanding of, well, what a hard stand is leasing for in that particular market. If it's $20 a square meter, then I can then work out what the tenant is actually paying for the warehouse. I hope that makes sense. Cool. Rusty's got another question. If owner occupier is getting harder to find, would it make sense to get the tenant and sell it to an investor? Yes. When do we make the transition into focus? Kind of have to look at it on a case-by-case scenario. So using Byron Bay as an example again, we feel like owner-occupiers are pretty strong there, but we also feel like investors are very strong there. You guys might disagree with me on this, but these are my thoughts. If these units were subdivided and leased out to a good tenant on a 5+5 year lease, let's say, and because some of these shops are pretty small, they're only like 70, 80 square meters, the overall price for something like this is only 500,000. You're starting to venture into residential investor land. If I was marketing that property, I would be going all over Sydney and Melbourne, and I would say something along the lines of own your own piece of Byron Bay for 500,000 and get 6% net yield. And you'll probably start to see a lot of residential investors go, oh yeah, actually, maybe I'll buy it because residential yields are so shit at the moment. I've got some money in my self-managed super fund. Maybe I will own a piece of Byron Bay. So when do you make that transition? It's hard to say, but I think two things is worth considering. One is you'll know within a pretty short period of time what the owner-occupier demand is. Probably within the first 2 or 3 months maximum, you'll be able to ask the agent that you've appointed to sell the property, how many percentage is owner-occupiers that are inquiring, how many percentage are investors that are inquiring. So you'll know pretty quickly. And if you're not getting offers from owner-occupiers in the first couple of months, then you might need to adjust your strategy and start pushing the investor market. So I hope that makes sense. Cool. You guys got any other questions or comments? Tim got another question. Can you touch on self-storage options? What do you think about containers on land? Containers, let's start with containers on land. So I assume what you're saying is you're just leasing the land out so people can park the containers? Oh, more that people can store stuff inside. Oh, okay. So, okay. So using that as self-storage. Yeah. I mean, containers, big space, if you think about it. I mean, even a 20-footer is, I don't know how many cubic meters that is. Like, that's a lot of space. So it's definitely not going to be a domestic. It won't be a domestic demand for that type of stuff, I would imagine. Like, you're not going to get someone with a 2-bedroom apartment and they want to store a couch in there because that's just too much space. It's probably going to be for businesses that wants to store the goods in there, some of their material in there. I think it's a good low budget alternative for storage. There you go, 33 cubic. That's a lot of space, 33 cubic. Yeah. Yeah, usually just did the research. Thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot of space. So the only thing, yeah. So the only thing that I'm thinking about is, yeah, look, if someone's renting a warehouse and they want to put a container on a hard stand to put their goods in it, that's cool, right? Because they're just leasing the land, they're leasing the hard stand. But if my interpretation of your previous question was actually building or providing a container yard for people to put their own containers so they can access, that's a different story. There could be some money in there to be made. I haven't looked into that, to be honest. But that's just another form of self-storage, but it's more catered to business owners that want to put their own container in there and put their own goods in there. So you're basically, rather than leasing the hard stand to one person, you might be leasing the hard stand to 10 different people. And all they have is access to the container, which they, provided, or maybe you provided, and you charge them more for it. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't really looked into that one, but I think if the numbers work, yeah, like if you can get the land cheap, and you can get the containers cheap, and you can charge for it, yeah, why not? And then touching on self-storage options. So, I mean, today's topic is about, subdivision, right? So I'm going to talk to that. I'm going to talk about that from a subdivision sort of perspective. So there are a lot of self-storage units out there, like King Storage, National Storage. Like, they're all popping up everywhere because more and more people are living in smaller spaces, and people are still hoarders. People still want to hold on to their stuff. I know I'm one of them. I'm guilty of that. So self-storage spaces pop up everywhere. Most of the business model is on a lease perspective. So you pay whatever, $100 a month for 3 square meters, or whatever it might be. But I've also seen people sell the self-storage space as a strata unit. I haven't seen the numbers behind it, to be honest. I'm happy to look into it and share with everybody later on. But I do know that some storage spaces are selling for 8, 9, in some cases 10 grand a square meter. So if you have a 5 square meter self-storage space, you're paying $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for it. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, Strata self-storage. There you go. There's one in North Sydney. Yeah, I should dig it up and find the numbers for it. Yeah. So, but I think that's a relatively good business model because self-storage is not expensive to build. And if you can get 8 grand a meter for it, like, that's pretty big margin. Elias? Your question?
You know how in the previous session you went through the steps through the I think it was a commercial real estate, how you how to find a property for that rental review strategy. What's the best way to find for the strata subdivision strategy? Like, what's the best way to, when you're researching, to look for?
Same sort of thing. Let's go for a drive now.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I mean, same sort of thing, right? You want to set your criteria. So what's your budget? For example, let's say your budget is 3 million, right? So you set your budget 3 million, maybe like 1 to 3 million. Maybe we want to do retail. And then you just click. Oh, geez, I've done Australia. Sorry. So let's find a spot. What's a good spot? What's a good spot? What's a good retail spot? I don't know, Chatswood. I don't know if anything will pop up here, to be honest, but let's just have a look. Okay, there's only 9 results. Okay, highly desirable future development. That's land. Okay, so that's land. That's not applicable. Oh, this one's interesting. Shops 57 and 58. Okay, so that one's already a strata development. We'll come back to that one. North-facing ground floor retail / commercial suite for sale. I don't know what that is, but that looks interesting. That's a freehold. I don't think you've ever strata that. What's this one? Yeah, I don't think you've ever strata that. That looks like a freehold as well. I don't think you've ever strata that. Taking serious offers now. Okay. If you have to put out an ad, that means you're not getting any luck selling it. I'm sorry. Okay, so we found 2 interesting ones. Okay, so we've got this one here, which is already a strata shop. And it's already 2 shops. It's already been strata subdivided in 57, 58. So let's see what it looks like. Is there any merit in this? Oh yeah, you're in a good part of town. For sale individual 1 line. Okay, so the way I'm looking at this, right, is it's already strata subdivided and it's already leased out, and it's leased out to 2027. So my triage sort of process will be, this might not be all that appealing, because if the existing tenants were interested in buying it, they would have done it already. And because it's hit the market the way it has, that means it's, you know, your 2 most obvious buyers being existing tenants, they're not going to be buyers. The leases are really long. Like this one here, 58, it's got 7+ occupancy and a further 3-year option. So this one's not going to be this. You won't be able to sell that to an owner occupier. This would just go to an investor. This one here doesn't say it has an option, so maybe this one could go to an owner occupier. I'm not sure, but overall, it doesn't look that attractive to me. It's got a long WALE. It's not really, you can't really sell to an owner occupier unless you buy it really cheap. But I don't think you'll be able to do that. So this one's not attractive for me. So let's have a look at this one here. So this one's Crow's Nest. What is it? It's a ground floor office. Yeah, okay. I don't like this one because it's sloped. You see how that's sloped there? That means I cannot open up another entrance here on this side. There's only 1 entrance here on this side. So if you look at the floor plan, that's where the slope is. So if I can buy this and then I could put a wall down the middle here and then have another opening here, then I will say, yeah, maybe there's something I can do here. But based on what I can see from the photos, there's nothing I can do here. There's no value add I can do here. So this one's not an attractive one for me. So let's pick another one. Maybe we'll look at warehouses. What's another good place? Maybe we'll look up. I know Tingalpa. Oops, sorry guys. Wow, only two. Wow,
I think you've only got property type 1. Yeah.
yeah, here we go. Sorry. Oh, here we go. That's better. So I've got 9 here. That's already shrouded. Let's have a look at that. I don't know what this is. Let's have a look at that. I don't know what this is. Let's have a look at that. Outstanding warehouse suit on occupied. That's already shrouded. You can't evaluate on that. That's already shrouded. You won't be able to evaluate on that. That's already shrouded. You can't evaluate on that. Same here, same here, same here. Okay. So let's have a look at this one. So I'm just going through. Okay, so it's already a shrouded complex, cold storage. Cool. Okay, so you got 2 units at the back, units 1 and 2. Okay, so that's what it looks like, and it's probably another 2 units in front. So it's already shrouded. So I don't think there's a lot of upside here from a strata perspective. But let's have a look. It's leased until 2025, so no option. Okay, that ticks one box. So that's a short-term whale. It's 727 square meters across 2 units. So I'm assuming each unit is roughly 350, 360 square meters. So for me to buy this, I will look at it on a cap rate. Because it's cold storage, and that's like another discussion to be had. Cold storage yield cap rates are typically 0.5 to 1% more than a typical warehouse. Tingalpa, the cap rate there is roughly around 5.5%. So I will probably say this property, if I were to price it, would be 182,1119 divided by, I would say 6.5%, but because it's a short whale, I would probably say 7%. 7%. So 2.6 million is what I might pay for it. So you divide that on a price per square meter, that's $3,578. What is Strata selling for in this market? I know because I've done the research, but you might not know. So what you might do is you might go, all right, well, let me have a look at what Strata's been selling for. Maybe I'll have to look at things that are smaller. Hey, where is it? Here you go. Maybe things that are 400 square meters or below, and see what they're selling for. And you might just like do this research, right? Just really quick, see if there's any asking prices. But so let's say you find something and then it turns out that Strata's been selling for $4,000 a meter. Then you kind of go back to here and go, well, look, if I'm buying this for $3,500, let's say, and Strata is selling for $4,000 a square meter, is that enough for me to make a margin on it? So back of an envelope calculation, I will say, all right, $4,000 a meter, I want 20% margin. So I'll divide by 1.2. So yeah, it won't work. Because the maximum you're going to pay for it is going to be $3,000 a meter after costs. And this property will probably sell around 2.5 million. So kind of go, all right, there's not enough margin in it, so I'll probably skip this one. So I just spent, 3 minutes on this one? So let's look at this one. Okay, here's another one. This is a slightly bigger one, but that's fine. Yeah, this looks really good for strata if I can cut it down the middle. Why? Driveway here, roll door here, roll door here. I would assume have to take a closer look at it. There's a showroom entrance here, showroom entrance here. So this would strata subdivide quite well if the numbers stack up. So let's have a look closer, look at some photos. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Concrete tilt up, looks good. Looks like in pretty good nick. Okay, that's the upstairs. Does it have a floor plan? No, no floor plan, but I'll ask the agent for a floor plan. So this one physically has a pretty compelling strata subdivision component to it, because I can see that I can just put up a couple of slabs down the middle and I could probably just split it because both have its own access way, its own warehousing and its own office component. So that's a pretty easy one. So the next thing I need to know is just, does the numbers stack up? That's all. Yep. Question?
You know how you get all your numbers and you get your comparisons with the sales and rental per square meter per sale and all that. Do you get it from here, from previous sales, or can you go to RP data? I know RP data is not the best with commercial, but where do you get your information and numbers from?
Yeah, the easiest place is just to go here.
Sold.
Sold. The only problem is not all of them will publish the price. So then you might need to then hop onto RP data and search the address and get the actual price.
So where do you spend most of your time, on here or RP data?
Both. Sorry, I spend most of my time on the phone.
Yeah.
Agents.
Because that can give you the accurate and to date price on what is sold, what it goes for, what the market is around that area. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So I'm talking about this from a perspective of maybe you guys still got your full-time jobs or full-time business you're running, and you're only able to maybe spare an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon before bed to do this, right? You might not have, a couple of hours a day, like me, because that's my business, to call agents to ask for detail. So the next best thing for you to do is just jump on here, look at things that are sold, sort it by newest. That's really important. And then just look it up. This one's got the price published, great. This one's got a price published, great. This one's doesn't, so you might need to hop onto RP data to find it. And then the other thing is look at it from a map view. So you can encompass things that are surrounding it as well. And then you just, put it into your spreadsheet and put it all there. Yeah, that's the only way to do it, unless you're on the phone talking to the agents. So for this will pass my initial triage stage. This one I would be going down and asking for details. Like, can I please get a copy of the IM, what's the price expectation? No. So this will pass triage. Looks like the lease is already expired.
Sorry, interrupt. I know Muscle Nation, I think, have moved. So I don't think they're there at this stage, but I know it's a very big business, and I know they've got another big warehouse. So I don't know where they moved to, but I know the boys that own that business, and yeah, they're massive.
Okay.
So they've moved out. I think they've bought their own.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Here you go. Subdividing warehouse optional. But yeah, that's good. That's good insight. So you know something that I didn't know, right? So that gives you an advantage. But just going through how I triage again, like I'm just showing you guys how I would charge something. Like this one, I will look at it and I have no idea what this is. It's the first time I've looked at it. Oh, it's a brand new complex. Yeah, like there's no value out there for me. Okay, so I get rid of that. All right, so I've looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and only one of them has potential. Okay, so I've triaged 5. I've got one that's moved to the next step. So if I just keep continuing this process, then I'll be able to build up my sort of triage quota, so to speak.
Well, I'm pretty sure a couple of months ago that site was sold. So I'm not sure if the new owners are selling again or they just haven't updated the details.
Yeah, I think you're right. So let's investigate. So Tim's got another question. What are the additional considerations you need to factor when looking at subdividing a lot with a body corporate in place? I think one of the key things is it's all about the numbers, but assuming the numbers stack up, obviously then you'll need the body corporate's approval for further subdivision, for further strata subdivision. So that's a key thing. They shouldn't have any reason to block it. But look, at the end of the day, it's body corporate's decision. If they say no, it's no. So you may want to look at properties where you could potentially be buying into a entitlement where you've got control of the process, or if you're buying off somebody who's got control of the process, make it a condition of sale that they must approve the additional strata subdivision application. Laz?
Moving forward, if we were to find a deal or a property that has potential value add, how could you help us? Like, how could you help me, or do we approach you on the side, like individually, or do I bring it up? Can I bring this deal on here so everyone can see it, or what's the deal? How does that work?
Okay. So that's probably a conversation we should have offline. But for the purpose of this course, it's simply to show you guys what I've done, teach you guys what I've done, and share with you guys my experience. What you guys make of it, how you guys use it, is completely up to you guys. But if you guys have found something that's really interesting, and that you want my help or my sort of opinion on it, then you can definitely approach me privately, and we can look at the opportunity together.
Yep, sounds great. Thanks.
Cool. All right, excellent. Okay, so any other questions before we wrap up? All right, cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys found it valuable and useful. Any questions you guys might have, feel free to email me, reach out to me. I'll come back to you on a couple of things that we looked at today, which I wasn't sure of. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys at the next session.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks so much, Will.
No worries. Thanks, guys. All right, take care.